This is going to be a very, very basic video on how I start my covers. Obviously there's, a massive amount of things that you can do aside from this, but this will give you a brief overview of how I basically work. So what I have here is my basic template that I use for doing covers with some generic information here in a folder, which you can see here. So I'm going to put everything underneath that, and the first thing I'm going to do is grab my basic figure. And since this is a rendering that I've done, I have the option to not have to cut her out, which is nice. So I'm going to copy her without the background and paste her straight into here, and then use free transform, and I'll get her to roughly the size that I want her, and we'll keep her fairly close up as so. And then, so this one, as I said, we don't have to cut out. And I'm not going to go that deeply into cutting out a background because there are a lot of different ways that you can do it, and it's quite time consuming. But I will show you a bit on how to do it with this. So I'm just going to roughly grab the head that I want to replace the original model's head with, place it on, and you can see we have some of the background. And I'll just say here, don't use masks, don't use a tool that takes out the background for you. You'll get a basic level of results, but you're really not going to get the results that you want. It's easier to do it properly by hand. So I've put her over the original model. What I'm going to do is reduce her opacity a bit so I can see the face, and I'm going to use free transform to roughly lay the eyes and mouth and general shape of the head over the model that I'm going to put her on. And I think I want her head flipped over. So I'm going to put her there like that. Check the overall size. And she's looking down, so she probably needs to come down a bit. And if this was a figure, what I would do is use this tool. And as I said, there are a lot of different ways that you can do it, but this is a rough and ready way of doing it. And I would very carefully, much more carefully than I'm doing here, use the lasso and just clear the area that I want to take out. I think she's still a little bit big. I'm going to take her down like that. And also the color is a bit different from the base model. So I'm going to go into color balance, and I'm going to add some blue into the shadows. Then in midtones I'm going to add a little bit more blue. And in highlights I'm going to put a bit of this cyan. I'm also going to make her a little bit more contrasty. And then, again, just very roughly at this point, I'm going to erase out the parts that I know I don't want, just so I can get a better feeling for what we have. So she is looking a bit closer closer. And I want to reposition her head slightly. And that's getting pretty close. The hair still isn't the blue-black of the original, so I'm going to put a slight feather on here. And again, use that lasso. And I'm going to make it a bit darker, increase the contrast a bit, and then I'm going to throw some blue in the shadows. Then I'm going to take my eraser again and reduce opacity so I'm not taking out the whole thing. And I'm just going to use that to kind of blend her in a bit. And we'll still need to do a lot of work on the hair, but you can see that she's already looking a bit closer to the original model. And I'm going to save, because Photoshop always crashes if you haven't saved. And I'm going to grab a background. Going to put it underneath her. And you shouldn't go larger than the original image, depending on what kind of original resolution you have and if you're putting textures over it. So I am going to risk it a bit because I'm going to be doing a lot to this. So basically it's Edit, Free Transform, and I'm just going to pull it like that. And we're going to kind of position that there and maybe move her and the head over by selecting both of these layers and clicking here and just nudge her a bit. Maybe up a bit and nudge her over. The next thing I'm going to add is this. On top of that, and again, reduce opacity and use Free Transform to look what you're doing, but kind of drag it around a bit. And I'm going to make that lightning just kind of kiss the top of that building. Then I'm going to take my eraser, make it a bit bigger, a bit more opacity, and erase so I can keep my road. So I'm erasing away so that I can keep the lightning, but then reduce opacity so I can bring in some of these nicer clouds. And yeah, let's try bringing in this as well. Again, I want to see how it positions. So I'm going to flip it over horizontal and use Free Transform again to just kind of roughly bring in a bit of burning city. And I know I want to keep my lightning, so I'm going to go ahead and just delete out a big chunk of that. And then we'll make it fit. And again, for the purposes of a video, this is going to be fairly rough and ready. You wouldn't want to do an actual cover this way. But all of this takes quite a lot of time, and that's why they pay us the bucks, right? I'm going to shift color a bit on this, add in a bit of yellow. Take that down a bit. And then I'll show you something that I do a lot on my covers. Before I do that, I'm going to take some gradient and knock this back a bit, just because the white dotted line was bugging me a bit. If I take the mouse and shift and select all three of these, I can duplicate those layers. And then I'm going to merge them so I have a copy of the lower one. And I'm going to shift that color. Yeah, purple. Then I'm going to erase it again. So I kind of have a mix of the two. Purple in the shadows, with the original orange-red showing through. And again, you really need to do this properly, but this will give you a rough idea of how to do this. And I use this a lot. And since we've done this all quick and crappy, you can see, you know, a bit of a line there. And I'm just going to be bad and take that out like that. Just using the little gradient tool there. So now we have a background that's not horrific. Let's add a bird in there. Normally, if he was on, you know, a cloudy sky background, I'd have to cut him out properly, but he's been cut out reasonably well, so I'm just going to select that with the magic wand tool, and then go select and inverse, which will, you know, switch it to the opposite, so you're just grabbing him. I'll copy him, and I'll put him behind. And again, free transform. So let's give her a bird companion. And again, now we're too busy over on that side of the screen. So I'm going to move her over a bit. And then go back to Mr. Bird. And you can see the kind of white halo around there because we did the cheap and cheerful way by just selecting the background. And I'm going to grab the burn tool and go fairly small on that. Go highlights and increase it a bit. And now I'm using the Wacom tablet rather than the mouse because this is just too difficult to do with the mouse. I'm going to go and darken that a bit. Again, this is just very quick and dirty. And then what I'll do is grab my eraser and just take out a bit of that. Now this will make his overall outline a lot softer, and if this was something that we were looking at close up, I wouldn't do it at all. But he's at a distance and our model is the focal point. So if we were actually looking at this scene, aside from running away from the burning city, we wouldn't see too much of the bird. You know, we wouldn't see him in focus if we were also looking at the model. So it's perfectly fine if he's a bit out of focus around the edges. I'm going to go back to my burn tool, but this time I'm going to do midtones and take it way down. I'm going to darken him a bit. Now he's very red gold. What I'm going to do is duplicate him, and I'm going to take his saturation way down, and I'm going to make him very purple blue. Because everything, you know, every object in the scene takes color from the light around them. So he would be picking up a bit of the purpley sky. So I'm going to bring back a bit of his red gold by doing that. And then I'll merge him again. And let's make him a bit more contrasty. There we go. And at this point, I am going to blur out his edges a bit more, which will knock that white highlight back and make him look a bit more like he's actually in flight. Again, the eye wouldn't be picking out close details, so I'll keep his head and neck, you know, fairly clear, but I'll give him a blur on the outside lines. Now you can see that he matches with his background a bit more. And final touch, I will feather this and use the lasso tool to grab a smoke texture. And I'll put that behind her just because it looks cool, and a lot of urban fantasy covers have smoke effects, you know, magic effects, fire effects, and it helps blend things a bit more. And let's make that, let's give her a fire colored one. And again, we're going to erase away the edges. So she's not hiding the background, but we just have some fairly natural, magic-y looking fog around her. And we'll probably take that back a bit, but for now I think that's okay. And I'm going to put a little bit of shadow there just to blend those areas a bit. And a bit of white, because she's picking up the light from the lightning. Again, on top of her, I'm going to do the same thing. Use free transform. And this one will make a bit purpley. Use our gradient tool to give us a bit of darkness around the bottom. And then start erasing. Because we just want it to kind of curve around the body. So we just do this by eye and take out a bit of it. Now she is a lot more contrasty and bright than the rest of her background is. So what I'm going to do is grab these two layers and again duplicate them. Merge those two, and we're going to have her pick up coloring from the background. Let's see. Let's give her some yellow-red from the fire here. And this can be super contrasty and bright because we're going to erase out a lot of it. Then let's throw in some blue and purple here. And so this will look more natural. We'll kind of take it out of the center so she's picking colors up from around the side. And just keep erasing until it looks right. So then our quick and dirty cover is about as finished as we're going to do. One very last thing, and obviously she needs a ton of work, she needs painting, and I'll do that on a separate video. But something else that you can do is add a texture overlay. And let me grab something like this. So on the very top layer, I'm going to position that and move it around till it's where I want it. And then, right here, go from normal to overlay, and you get some cool effects. You can switch the color and the saturation. We're going to make it kind of blue. And then, oops, we'll take opacity down a bit. So if you look at her without, with, adds a bit of texture, and it changes your contrast as well depending on what texture you've used. So there you go. Semi-crappy, but usable cover. And there's so much more that we can do to this, and it's kind of bugging me, so I'm making the bird stand out a bit more. But there we go.